Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is December 24th, 2015. We're finally there, so in just a moment we'll be on with your forecast across the state, hopefully revealing the clues to the weather in your area. Now, when we're not here, you can always visit us by going to www.arh.noaa.gov or simply call our information line at 1-800-472-0391. And don't forget, we have social media pages, and that's available on Twitter, Facebook, and you can always go to YouTube and type in AKweather to look up the edition that we have here playing this evening. Now on to the special topics tonight. We do have some watches, warnings, and advisories out there. Let me remind you that the red is the warning as coded along the top banner here. We have the watches in orange and the yellow advisories. Okay, and first we're going to start over here in the west along the Yukon Delta. We do have a winter storm warning for snow out in this area. Visibility is reduced to 1 mile or less at times. Snow accumulations between 2 to 4 inches through the end of the storm, which will be ending Friday night in that area. And then along the Bering Strait, we have a blizzard warning that continues in that region, and that's for conditions with visibilities reduced to near zero at times. Very gusty conditions along that west coastal area with gusts between 40 to 60 miles per hour out of the east with higher gusts up to 65. Now across the southwestern areas, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, they're under a high wind warning for late tonight. We're going to be seeing some winds out of the east to south directions, and that's going to last through the morning hours on Friday. Across the western Prince William Sound and areas just inland along the eastern Kenai here, there's going to be some heavy snow. So a winter storm warning for heavy snow, and that's going to start your Friday morning, 9 o'clock, run through the day. They're expecting totals there between 15 to 30 inches with the highest totals inland, especially in areas like Turnagain Pass. So be aware with these travel conditions. Now taking a look across the southeast, we have a watch out here. The storm that we're going to be talking about in just a moment will be moving into this area Friday evening into Saturday. So expect snow to begin there heading into the weekend with totals between 4 to 10 inches. So moving on to the northern areas of the state, we had a very cold air mass and gusty winds out of the west, and that's going to continue through the early evening hours. So look for wind chills down to negative 55 degrees. We also have a wind chill advisory out here along the Kotzebue Sound. Look for wind chills down to 45 degrees below zero, and that's going to run through late tonight. Just one more recap here. Don't forget the winter storm warning on the Yukon Delta. That's running through Saturday. Now let's look at the weather systems that are bringing these watches and warnings to the area. We have an upper level low pressure system that's sitting over the western Bering. And you can see it's just kind of losing momentum and looking like it's fizzling out. But there's another wave of energy that's coming up from the North Pacific, and you can see this is heading towards the Alaska Peninsula. So you can see the surface low associated with this. This is kind of going to wind down, and this next system is going to be winding up, absorbing the energy that's across that western Bering. Let's watch that and put that in motion. one more time. As you can see, there's just a little hint of it right there, shortwave along the IR. Now across the southeast, they had a little bit of a break in between the systems today, so a bit of clearing across the eastern Gulf waters, southeast through the Panhandle, some clearing across the south central areas, but clouds moving into the Kenai Peninsula. A little bit of a break behind Kodiak, but that's going to be quickly replaced by that next system. Now here's the surface map today. Not much going on in cloud cover across the northern areas of the state, but we have this very strong ridge of high pressure, and this brought some very cold temperatures across the northern tier of the state, with temperatures ranging to -20 to -40 degrees. Now looking at the more serious weather across the Bering Strait, we have a warm front that just kind of nudged north of Nunivak Island to St. Matthew Island, and this is bringing some gusty winds along the frontal area out of the east, with snow continuing across the St. Lawrence Island. We also have some snow occurring across the Yukon Delta, which ended late this afternoon across the Kuskokwim Delta. Now just to the south of that, we have a very tight pressure gradient and rain conditions across the eastern areas of the Bering. And here's this next surface low that's heading up, and it's just south of the eastern Aleutians late this evening. We'll see that starting to advance with a warm front to the south. In the meanwhile, on the backside of this low pressure system that's kind of fizzling out over the west, very cold air mass indicated by these darker gray temperatures in the satellite, and then a cold front just along the central area of the Aleutians with a warmer air mass with the lighter color clouds just ahead of it. So some snow showers have been occurring with very strong westerly flow on the backside of this low pressure system. This was the dominant system today at 959 millibars, and here's this other system which will quickly deepen and change form overnight. It's going to become about equal as we head towards midnight, and you can see this gradient right along the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay beginning to tighten. These winds will be out of the southeast direction out ahead of this front, and mainly rain conditions along the front. So expect those gusty winds tonight to reach all the way up into the Bering Strait, with the gusty snow conditions still continuing across the northern areas of the Bering, St. Lawrence Island, and a large swath of snow all the way back towards Shimia. Now we have a little bit of a break in between systems for the southeast. Showers from a weak trough axis across the area yesterday are continuing just along the eastern areas, but that won't work into the southeast tonight. Across south central, dry conditions and very cold conditions lasting one more night across the northern tier of the state. Now, as we head into your day on Friday, this low pressure system looks ominous, and that's because it's going to be dropping down to 952 millibars coming up from that North Pacific as it moves through. Therefore, we'll see those strong winds peaking during the early morning hours across the Alaska Peninsula and the Bristol Bay. So look for snow beginning to creep further north into Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Delta. Some showers there for the Kuskokwim Valley. And the big question is the snow going to get into South Central? We're going to see that work into the Alaska Peninsula. Like I said, there is a winter storm warning for the heavy snow across the western areas of the Prince William Sound. Very gusty wind conditions along this front, but mainly visibility is reduced to the wetness of the snow falling in that area. So snow across the Kenai will change possibly over to rain by the end of the day, with Kodiak receiving mostly rain with that warmer air mass nudging up overnight. This snow might work just ahead of the front, but we're not expecting any accumulations across South Central, but you might see a few flakes across the area. Now, as we head into Friday night, this is going to be the system to watch. The panhandles get into the snow action, with snow developing late evening as that front approaches the southeastern areas. Across the northern tier of the state, mainly dry conditions with that ridge moving off to the east. They should see a warming trend, although, not quick at first. It's going to be a slow warming trend, but better than the conditions that have been in place for the past few days. Now, rain and snow will continue across the Bering, with the rain line staying just to the north of the Pribilof Islands. Very tight gradient staying around this surface low will bring gusty conditions to the entire Bering. Now, as we head into the day on Saturday, expect conditions to improve across the Bering. Winds will start coming down, and another front will be on its way up to Shimia. Another warm system bringing a mix of rain and snow across the western areas, and rain heading towards the central Aleutians. Now, this low pressure system across the eastern Bering will begin to track slowly to the east. We'll see that mix of rain and snow across the areas of the Bristol Bay and the Kenai, with some snow making it inland. The best chance for snow across most of South Central will begin Friday night. Across the Panhandle and the southeast, they'll get into the heavier snow conditions on Saturday, with rain primarily over the Gulf. With another front being reinforced by an upper wave, we'll see rain continuing over Kodiak Island through Saturday, and a few flurries might make it inland across the interior areas, but mainly dry again for the north and northwestern areas. Blizzard conditions should be coming to an end later on Saturday for the St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coastal areas, as this gradient begins to slacken behind the low pressure system moving off. Also to note, on Saturday, in replace of the gusty winds and snow, fog will probably set up for that northern area of the Bering. Looking at your temperatures today, got very warm across Kodiak Island in the mid-30s, and across much of the Gulf waters in the upper 20s to mid-30s there along the coast. And then for the southeast, pretty much staying in the mid-20s today. Now, across the interior locations, very cold. Arctic Village and areas north here are all in the -20 to -35 range, and along the north slope they were hovering right around -20 degrees. Now, across the Seward Peninsula, slightly warmer, getting up into the teens as that warm front had pushed up just to the north of Nunivak Island. So all across the central Bering locations saw temperatures in the mid to upper 30s. Warmest location this afternoon was around Dutch Harbor, with temperatures reaching up to 44 degrees there. A colder air mass coming in on the backside towards Shimia kept them below freezing today. Now, as we head into tonight, expect that temperature regime to stay very cold, especially around Arctic Village, -45, to the Arctic slope staying in the -20 to -25 region below zero. And then we'll also see those gusty conditions, and wind chills should be improving overnight as the little bit of a warmer air mass works its way in behind this high pressure. Now, across the southern tier of the state, mainly near 10 degrees and below, warmest across the Alaska Peninsula in the upper 30s. Across much of the Bering, they'll see in the low 30s to mid 30s. And then tomorrow, much warmer temperatures are going to be working in across the southwest. So if you're looking for the warmer temperatures to set in, looking mainly for Saturday, but they'll start seeing them across much of the west areas of the state, and across the south, they'll still stay on the cool side in the upper 20s to mid 30s towards the Dixon entrance. Northern tier of the state, again, will be -10 degrees to 20 degrees below zero. And then we'll see flying weather conditions across the Bering, once again, mostly IFR and along the front that's extending out into the Gulf. So expect MVFR conditions to develop late across the south, the east, and along the Panhandle, and primarily VFR conditions across the northern tier of the state and across the western Bering. They will also see MVFR to IFR conditions. Now, looking at your passes in more depth, Anaktuvik Pass will be VFR, and Adigan Pass will also be VFR. Looking at Lake Clark and Merrill, both MVFR conditions, and Rainy will be MVFR. Looking at Windy, also VFR, and Isabel, VFR. And South Central, all across there, VFR conditions expected, even for Tanita. And Portage, however, will go MVFR to IFR conditions with the front pushing into that area. Chilkoot and White Pass will go VFR very late in the day to MVFR. The freezing levels will be hugging across the southeast and the northern Gulf, and across the Bristol Bay area to the northern Bering. And then we see a climb of the freezing level from 2,000 to 6,000 across the southern areas of the Gulf. Looking at your icing for tomorrow, stay focused across the southeast late in the day and along the northern Gulf as that front pushes through early. And then across the southwestern areas, we'll see possible widespread conditions across the eastern areas of the Bering. And then light conditions, icing across the rest of the Bering. Your jet stream for tomorrow, we have this amplified pattern across the Bering and the Gulf with the strong jet stream supporting this low pressure system that's developing at the surface. So be on the lookout for those very strong gusty wind conditions to set up out of the southeast across the eastern Kenai over towards the western areas. And then the flow on the backside will be all between 40 to 50 knots across all of the Bering. And then the Bering areas will see north to northwesterly flow, lighter flow across the northern tier of the state with ridging just passing by the southeast. So they'll see a break between systems. A very similar system right at the surface there as this system bottoms out and is stacked with between 60 to 80 knots at the 3,000 foot level across the southwest and Kenai. Now a northwesterly flow, a very similar pattern at the surface, very strong winds just on the backside will translate down between 50 to 65 knots. The northern tier of the state will have a change of flow direction from the southeast with light flow across the eastern Beaufort seacoast, and the southeast will see a southerly flow between 25 to 35 knots just off the surface. Turbulence for tomorrow, you should be aware that the southwest coast and the eastern areas and central areas of Aleutians are going to be hit very hard with this system moving up from the Pacific, and conditions will also be turbulent across much of the Gulf and all the western areas of the state. Now in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Behold the New Year's Eve star. Greetings, fellow stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory. Every year on Stargazers, we encourage you to celebrate New Year's Eve the cosmic way. Because if you go outside at the stroke of midnight every New Year's Eve, you will see something very special, which James and I like to call the New Year's Eve star.
That's right, Dean. And we have some really nice planets to help you ring in 2016 as well. Let's show you. Okay, we've got our skies set up for 8 p.m. your local time on Thursday, December 31st, New Year's Eve, facing due south. And first, like all good astronomers, let's draw an imaginary line from the due south horizon straight up to the zenith point overhead, and then down the other side of the sky to the horizon due north. This line is called the meridian, and it divides the eastern half of the sky from the western half.
Exactly. And now, as our Earth slowly rotates from west to east, we are treated nightly to the grandest optical illusion in nature, as we watch the stars appear to rise in the east, slowly travel across the sky all night long, and eventually set in the west. And if you watch the stars every single night, you'll eventually conclude that the highest point any star reaches above the horizon in its nightly journey is when it is on the meridian.
This is very important to telescope users because the higher an object is above the horizon, the better it will appear in a telescope.
So when we were researching which planets would be high up off the horizon for viewing this New Year's Eve, we came across an amazing coincidence.
That coincidence is that no matter where you happen to be on New Year's Eve, Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, will reach its highest point in the sky at midnight. This puts Sirius almost on the meridian.
Think of it, the brightest star visible from our planet reaches its highest point above the horizon at midnight every New Year's Eve. It's a wonderfully poetic, cosmic reminder that this most brilliant of stellar lights is welcoming in the new year, giving us all hope for a bright new beginning.
And even better, if you happen to miss it on New Year's Eve because it's too cold or cloudy out, don't fret because Sirius will be in almost the same spot at midnight each night for the first week of the new year.
And think about this as you gaze up at Sirius this New Year's Eve. While our sun is 1,000,000 miles wide and a relatively cool yellow star, Sirius is a much hotter, almost twice as wide white star. And it's very close, cosmically speaking.
That's right, Dean. Sirius is only 8.5 light years away, which means that when we look at Sirius this New Year's Eve, we will actually be seeing the light that left it 8.5 years ago on June of 2007.
Now, if you happen to be one of those people who sleeps through the midnight festivities,
or you're coming home late after said festivities,
we have a nice series of planetary pairings just before sunrise on New Year's Day for you. Let's show you. Okay, we have our skies set up for just before sunrise on Friday, January 1st, 2016. And high in the south, you'll see the giant planet Jupiter near the waning crescent moon.
To the lower left of the moon, you'll see the red planet Mars next to the bright star Spica.
Then, closer to the horizon, toward the east, you'll see a small triangle of bright lights, the brightest of which is Venus. And then down and closest to the horizon is Antares, the heart of Scorpius the Scorpion.
Then, off to the left of that pair is the ring planet Saturn. Oh, how I love conjunctions. So, as you ring in 2016, step outside at midnight Thursday night, December 31st, and make your new year bright with cosmic light.
And check out the lineup of the planets before sunrise on New Year's Day. Keep looking up.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Let's take a quick look at your ice edge along the northern Bering here, just stretching just south of the St. Lawrence Island and forecasted to move about 40 nautical miles to the southwest as we head across the next 5 days as those colder temperatures continue. Now across the Bristol Bay area we still have ice, however not going to see too much growth there with the warmer temperatures, and then we still have the Cook Inlet that's going to be holding with the ice along the northern inlet there. Now for your southeastern areas for Friday, look for gale gusty winds across the northern outer waters out of the south and east directions across the entire area, between 30 to 35 knots to the south here, and then across the inner channels maybe some higher gusts, but primarily out of the north at 15 knots, changing direction towards the Dixon entrance out of the southeast at 20 knots. Now looking at your Saturday, seas increase between 4 to 5 feet to 7 feet to the south across the inner channels, all out of the south direction for your Saturday between 20 and 25 knots. Outer waters will see high seas between 17 and 18 feet. Looking across the western Gulf and all areas of the Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait, very strong gusty winds will prevail for your Friday out of the east direction, becoming more southerly towards Kodiak Island, a northerly flow across the Cook Inlet direction, and even Prince William Sound will be up there 35 knots out of the east with higher gusts possible across these areas. Seas across the Cook Inlet will be between 9 and 10 feet. Shelikof Strait and the Barren Islands will be between 10 to 15 feet. And across the western areas of the Gulf between 15 to 25 feet. And then we'll see things relax on Saturday, however, keeping still gale criteria across much of the western Gulf between 35 and 40 knots. And then across the Prince William Sound, better conditions around 20 knots. The Cook Inlet will see 20 knots, all out of the north and east directions through the Shelikof Strait, with seas between 5 to 8 feet on your Saturday. Looking at your Bristol Bay area, strong winds 50 knots out of the east to the south of the Alaska Peninsula, out of the south and southeast directions between 45 and 50 knots. These areas will see higher gusts on your Friday, and seas will be 13 feet across the Bering side and 25 to 27 feet across the Pacific side. Saturday will be a change of direction for the winds, east to north direction across the Bering side and west to southeast direction just to the south of the Alaska Peninsula. Seas will be between 5 and 13 feet on the Bering side, and along the Pacific again 25 to 27 feet. Looking at your Aleutian area, very strong gusty winds, storm force across most of the area out of the northwesterly direction, and seas on this day will be between 15 and 32 feet, with the highest seas there across the eastern areas of the Aleutians. On your Saturday, we'll see a change of wind direction, shifting out of the south for the western Aleutians and becoming more west to south across the eastern half of the Aleutians. Seas on this day will come down between 15 to 22 feet across the area, and Shimia will be max gale winds as well as the areas near Dutch Harbor. Now looking at your west coast forecast, looking at very strong winds tomorrow with storm force towards Nunivak Island and south out of the east and northeasterly directions, with seas between 13 to 16 feet across the Bering. On Saturday, a little bit better conditions between 20 to 30 knots across the area, the strongest winds to the south with seas between 9 and 14 feet. Now your northwest and north coast and northwest coast will see stronger winds towards Kotzebue Sound out of the east to northeast direction, and then as you head towards the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, winds will be lighter there out of the west at 10 knots. And Saturday, more of an easterly flow, uniform across the area, between 20 to 30 knots on Saturday. Just taking a recap at your forecast, be on the lookout for very high winds across the Alaska Peninsula, mainly east of Cold Bay. Looking at gusts out of the southeast for tonight, between 40 to 50 miles per hour with gusts up to 75 miles per hour, including Bristol Bay, and wintry conditions continuing across the western areas of the state, a break across the north and southeast. As we head into your day Friday, this low pressure system will move up, bringing snow across much of the southwestern areas, with a change of precip to all rain across the eastern Bering. Looking for snow to creep up Friday night into Saturday towards the southeastern areas of the state, so look out for high snow accumulations across western Prince William Sound and heading into the southeast and Panhandle for the weekend. And still gusty conditions will continue across the Bering. Have a Merry Christmas, and thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing are important to you, please consider applying for one of the open seats on your Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council. These seats will be filled by rural Alaskans who are knowledgeable about fish and wildlife subsistence in their region. Apply by Friday, January 29th, 2016. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.